I know this is part of our Exodus study, but we're going to be in Hebrews quite a bit this morning, if you want to go over there. We looked at the law last week and the covenant that God had made with Moses and the children of Israel and their response to it. And as we look at that, something that becomes confusing, it's confusing for many, is to what degree, or are Christians under the law of Moses, or to what degree are we under the law of Moses? You know, what do we do with the Old Testament? Because 2/3 of our Bible is Old Testament. How does that apply? How much of that are we under when we read through Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy, and we see all these commandments and stuff like that God's given to the people of Israel? How do we make any application of that to our life? And so we're going to talk about that to some degree today, and then as we try to finish up Exodus next week, we'll talk about it a little bit more. But I thought this would be a good place to add this in. So we're going to be in Hebrews. Let's go ahead and pray, and we'll get started. Father, thank you for the time you've given to us. Lord, thank you for your tremendous goodness and grace to us. Would you please help us today to focus? Would you help us to learn from your word? And pray that you help us to have a greater appreciation for it and better understanding how it applies to our life. In Jesus' name, amen. So let's just start here and work through the notes, and then we'll get to Hebrews here in just a second. So what does the law mean for the Christian? This is what we're looking at. Well, we need to ask the question first, who was the law for and how long was it in effect? Because the Scripture teaches about this. Notice here, number one, it was added to the Abrahamic covenant. So the law did not supplant anything prior to it. It was added. It was added to that Abrahamic covenant. So Abraham and his descendants already had that Abrahamic covenant. And that Abrahamic covenant, the basis of it was faith. Because God didn't choose every descendant of Abraham. Remember, this is Romans chapter 9. God didn't choose every descendant of Abraham. It was those who were of faith. They are the elect. Those who believe the promise, they are the ones who are counted for the seed. And so, those are the ones that carried the Abrahamic covenant. Now, for the children of Israel, the Abrahamic covenant is that we're to believe to inherit those promises. But the problem is we often don't believe. And so the law comes along. It's added on top of the Abrahamic covenant, so to speak, for a specific purpose, to bring us to faith in Jesus Christ, in particular, the Jewish people. So notice here, Galatians 3:19, wherefore then serveth the law? Or what's the point of the law? It was added because of transgressions till the seed should come. That's talking about Jesus, to whom the promise was made. And it was ordained by angels in the hand of a mediator. So that mediator there is talking about Moses. He acted as a mediator for the children of Israel. We talked about that last week. And so Moses comes down from the mountain after speaking with God. He comes down from the mountain to be with the people of Israel. And while he's down with the people, they hear the thunderings, they see the lightnings, they see the cloud, the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire up on the mountain, and they hear God's voice as he speaks the Ten Commandments, and they say, we can't listen anymore. We can't listen anymore. You're going to have to go to God for us and hear from him and then come back and tell us what we're supposed to do. So that was to be the plan. He is the mediator. So that's what it's talking about there. It was ordained by angels in the hand of a mediator. So that's how the law came to the people of Israel. Now notice here, number 2. The law was a schoolmaster to bring the Jew to Christ. Now, what exactly is a schoolmaster? Anybody got an idea what a schoolmaster is? Teacher, okay, that's one way it's used. I think you guys might already have those, but you got another one. And that's free too. We'll just give that one to you. But a schoolmaster, we think of it a little bit differently. We do think of a teacher, but a schoolmaster in particular, the way it's used in the Greek language, a schoolmaster was more of kind of like a tutor, but kind of a guardian. They were a servant that the upper class families would often appoint to guard this child. And that child was not allowed to leave the house without this guardian. They weren't allowed to go anywhere without this guardian. And so they would go to school or wherever. That guardian was there to make sure that they behaved exactly like they were supposed to, and they executed discipline or punishment when they were not obeying. And in fact, these schoolmasters were often known to be very, very strict disciplinarians, to the point to where you longed to no longer be under this schoolmaster. That was kind of the point. And so the point was that this schoolmaster is so burdensome, so weary to me, just kind of grates at me and is so strict, I can't wait for, it's kind of like kids are with their parents sometimes or with school. I can't wait until I don't have to be under these rules anymore. And that's exactly one of the purposes of the law. The purpose of the law was to be strict for the people of Israel. It was to put pressure on them. It was to keep them in line so that they would long for deliverance from it. That was the point. And that's one of the points that Peter brings up later on in Acts chapter 15. When we'll look at it here in just a moment, but there's the council in Jerusalem in Acts 15. And there's some Jews that are coming around saying, well, it's great that you Gentiles want to follow Christ, but you have to become a Jew first. You need to be circumcised to keep the law of Moses if you want to be saved. And Peter's like, what are you talking about? Neither we nor our fathers could keep that law. We've been delivered from that. We couldn't keep it. Why would we expect the Gentiles who aren't brought up that way to begin to keep it? It's just not possible. And so this was the point of the schoolmaster. And that's why Paul says here in Galatians 3:24, wherefore the law was our schoolmaster to bring us unto Christ that we might be justified by faith. And then he actually says in the next verse, but after that faith has come, we are no longer under the schoolmaster. We're no longer under that. The point of it was to, in essence, drive us to Jesus Christ. That was the purpose of it for the Jews, was to long for that day when Messiah would come and deliver them from that law. And that's why God gives a promise in Jeremiah chapter 31. And we'll look at that in Hebrews here in just a moment. But Jeremiah 31, God says, I'm going to make a new covenant with the house of Israel, with the house of Judah, not like the old covenant that I made with them. Not like the covenant that I made with them when I took them out of Egypt. So it's going to be a new covenant, a different one, and they were to long for that day when God's law is not external, but it's written upon the human heart at that point. And God causes us to walk in his ways as opposed to it all having to be done through self-will. Now notice here, number 3, the law as a covenant was in effect until the new covenant began. Okay? The law as a covenant was in effect until the new covenant began. So let's look here, Hebrews chapter 8. I don't think I told you a chapter before, but Hebrews chapter 8. Hebrews 7, 8, and 9 deals with this subject. And the issue here is very similar. At this point, we're nearing the end of, I guess you could say, the apostolic era, so to speak. This book of Hebrews, I think, was written near the late 60s AD, probably around 66, 67, something like that, AD. And at this particular point, the Jewish believers, are facing intense persecution from the Jewish people. And they are tempted to go back to religious Judaism. They're tempted to go back to all the sacrifices, to go back to the temple, to go back to all these things. And essentially what the book of Hebrews says is you turn away from Christ to go back to that and you will be damned. That's what he tells them. And he tells them at least 5 times in this book, that is what's going to happen to you if you depart from Christ. And so the book of Hebrews is contrasting. Look, there's the old covenant, which is Moses and the law and the temple and the sacrifices, and then there's the new covenant through Jesus Christ. And the new covenant with Jesus Christ is by far better in every way than the old covenant. And so that's what he's doing. He's contrasting the old with the new here. And he's trying to help them understand, look, we're not under that anymore, because those things were just a shadow. Now, what's better, a shadow of something or the actual substance of something? The actual substance of something. You know, for the most part, I think most wives would rather not see the shadow of their husband. They would rather see their husband, right? I mean, I guess that depends on the husband that you have. Maybe the shadow's better looking. But for the most part, you would rather see your spouse as opposed to just having a shadow of them. And this is exactly the point that Paul is making here in these chapters. So notice here, chapter 8, verse number 6. Verse number 6, he says, "But now hath he," talking about Jesus, "obtained a more excellent ministry." Let's just go ahead and back up to verse 1. That way we get a little bit better context here. "Now the things which we have spoken, this is the sum." So this gets right to the point of the book of Hebrews. "We have such an high priest who is set on the right hand of the throne of majesty in the heavens, a minister of the sanctuary and of the true tabernacle which the Lord pitched and not man. For every high priest is ordained to offer gifts and sacrifices." So when he says every high priest here, he's talking about those priests that are on the earth. So at this particular point, the temple, Jerusalem had not been destroyed. The temple is still there. There's still a Levitical priesthood in operation in Jerusalem at this time. And he says, every high priest is ordained to offer gifts and sacrifices. Wherefore it is of necessity that this man, talking about Jesus, have somewhat also to offer. Okay, so he had to make a sacrifice too. If he's going to be a high priest, he has to make a sacrifice. Now with Jesus' high priesthood, what sacrifice did he make? Himself, exactly. It was his life, yeah. He says, verse 4, "For if he were on earth, he should not be a priest." Why wouldn't he be able to be a priest if he was on earth? This is getting into, we'll talk about it, but this is getting a little into the context of Hebrews. But what tribe was Jesus from? Judah. What tribe were the priests from? Levi. So he couldn't be a priest if he was on earth, because he would have to have been from the tribe of Levi. Well, then he couldn't be a king. So this is the point. We'll get to it in just a second, because in chapter 7 he talks about the fact that it's a different priesthood that he's a priest of. Melchizedek, so he could be a king and priest together. So if he were on earth, he could not be a priest, seeing there are priests that offer gifts according to the law, who serve unto the example, and what's that next word? Shadow of heavenly things, as Moses was admonished of God when he was about to make the tabernacle. For see, saith he, that thou make all things according to the pattern showed thee in the mount. So when Moses is up on the mountain receiving instruction for the tabernacle, not only did he receive words, but apparently he saw some sort of a blueprint or something of it while he was up there talking to God, because you read, it's really interesting, because as you read through Exodus and Leviticus, and you hear all these instructions about the tabernacle, it's like, how in the world did they figure out how to get this thing put together? It's like, I have no idea. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Well, how did that happen? It's because Moses saw what it was like, and Moses oversaw the construction of that tabernacle. So he was the chief engineer, I guess you could say. Verse 6, "But now hath he," Jesus, "obtained a more excellent ministry," more excellent than the Levitical priesthood, "by how much also he is the mediator of a better covenant, which was established upon better promises. For if the first covenant," talking about the Mosaic covenant, the former, first as in former covenant, "had been faultless, then should no place have been sought for the second. For finding fault with them, he saith." Now notice here, the fault is not in the covenant itself. There was nothing wrong with the law. I mean, this is God's law. There was nothing wrong with it. The problem was the people. The people could not keep the law, and that was the point, and they missed that point. He's so finding fault with them, talking about Israel, he saith, "Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel, with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made." It's doing it again. It's doing it again. Blasted. Demons in the sound system. Not deacons, Demons in the sound system. The deacons leave the sound system alone. For finding fault with them, he saith, Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of Egypt. So, when I took them by the hand to lead them out of Egypt, when was that? That's the Exodus, right? That's when Moses brought them out. God took them by the hand, led them out. So it's not going to be a covenant like that one. Okay? So if we're under the new covenant, that means the old covenant is no more. Right? As far as the covenant goes. And I regard them not, saith the Lord. Verse 10, For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my laws into their minds and write them in their hearts, and I will be to them a God, and they shall be to me a people. And they shall not teach every man his neighbor and every man his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for all shall know me, from the least to the greatest. So he's saying, look, when that law is put in their hearts, and they have a new heart, you're not going to have to go around telling people, look, you need to follow the Lord. Why? Because they're going to do it. Because their nature is going to be changed. This is what the new covenant does. The new covenant, the promise of the new covenant, is that God changes the person. He's not forcing conformity as it was under the old covenant. It's you do or you're going to end up dying. That's not the way it is in the New Testament. In the New Testament, God says, I'm going to change your heart. I'm going to put a new spirit, a new heart within you. I'm going to put my laws upon you, and I'm going to cause you to walk in my ways. Now, I'm going to be the one doing it in you. He says, For I will be merciful to their unrighteousness, and their sins and their iniquities will I remember no more. In that he saith, a new covenant. He hath made the first old. Now that which decayeth and waxeth old is ready to vanish away. So verse 13 is talking about the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. The idea is that the moment Jesus dies on the cross, the Old Testament, then the Mosaic covenant becomes the Old Covenant. And because it is now the Old Covenant and is no longer operative, what remains is essentially a decaying corpse, which is exactly how he's describing the practice of those priests and stuff at the temple at that time. It's just the leftover remnants of a decaying corpse, and it's not going to be long, he says. It's going to vanish away. And that's what happened in 70 AD. 70 AD, Roman general Titus comes in, levels the city of Jerusalem, kills most of the Jews, disperses a good number of them throughout, and there's no temple, there's no priesthood, there's no Jews in the land. They're all gone. It has, at that point, it vanishes away. It is no more. It is impossible at that point then to participate or practice any Levitical priesthood. Now let's look at chapter 9. Chapter 9, verse 11. But Christ, being come an high priest of good things to come, by a greater, let me see here. Did I just want to do that? Yeah. Okay. By a greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands, that is to say, not of this building. So talking about the temple in Jerusalem. So it's not like that. It's a better one. Now, we'll see this here in just a moment, but when he talks about this tabernacle, he's not, I don't think, there's some discussion on this, I don't think he is speaking of an actual physical temple in heaven. I believe he is talking about heaven itself, describing heaven as a tabernacle where God dwells. Okay? Because there's nothing else in the Scripture to give us any indication that there's a building in heaven, that there's a physical building there. And we'll see that as we go down through here. Notice verse 12. Neither by the blood of goats and calves, but by his own blood he entered in once into the holy place, having obtained eternal redemption for us. For if the blood of bulls and of goats and the ashes of an heifer, sprinkling the unclean, sanctify to the purifying of the flesh, how much more shall the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without spot to God, purge your conscience from dead works to serve the living God? Let me see here. A few more verses here. And for this cause he is the mediator of the New Testament, that by means of death for the redemption of the transgressions that were under the first testament, they which are called might receive the promise of eternal inheritance. For where a testament is, there must also of necessity be the death of the testator. For a testament is of force after men are dead, Otherwise, it is of no strength at all while the testator liveth. Whereupon, neither the first testament was dedicated without blood. And we'll read more here in just a second. So, there's a contrast that he's making. So he says, on earth, there was a physical tabernacle, there were animal sacrifices, and the only thing that took care of was the flesh. It was all external, and all it did was affect you externally. But he says Christ's sacrifice is better, because Christ now has entered into heaven, and he didn't have to sacrifice as the other priests did for himself. Right? What were the sacrifices for? They were for sins. Did Jesus have any sin? No, so he wouldn't have to sacrifice for himself. But he says, by his own blood, by shedding his blood on the cross, he died. 3 days later, rose again. 40 days later, he ascended up to heaven, and he walks into the presence of God. It's a better sacrifice. He didn't have to come with blood into God's presence. He came by blood through his death, came into God's presence, and now he stands there. It's a better sacrifice. He is ever in the presence of God, making intercession for us. It's far better than the priest going in one time a year. It's far better than that. He's there 24/7. Seven days a week, all day, every day. Jesus is there interceding on our behalf. That's what keeps us saved. And that would be terrible to be under the old covenant. It's like, oh, for one more year? Okay, I'll be merciful to you for one more year. Next year comes along, well, got to do this all over again. Hope we do it the right way. One more year. But it's not that way anymore. The moment we get saved, it is eternally settled. That's just wonderful. Now let's notice this here. Verse 19. For when Moses had spoken every precept to all the people according to the law, he took the blood of calves and goats and water and scarlet wool and hyssop. This is talking about Exodus 24. And sprinkled the book and the people, saying, this is the blood of the testament which God hath enjoined unto you. Moreover, he sprinkled with blood both the tabernacle and all the vessels of the ministry. And almost all things are by the law purged with blood, and without shedding of blood is no remission. It was therefore necessary that the patterns of things in the heavens, should be purified with these, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. For Christ is not entered into the holy place made with hands, which are the figure of the true, but into where? Heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. So we see there, he's contrasting, there was a tabernacle on earth, but Jesus has entered into heaven. Seems that he's indicating there is no physical tabernacle in heaven, just the place itself, the place where God dwells, because that's what the tabernacle was here on earth. Now let's look at another one. Let's go to chapter 7. Hebrews chapter 7. We'll back up a little bit. Hebrews 7, verse 12. For the priesthood being changed, so going from the Levitical priesthood under the Old Covenant to a Melchizedekian priesthood, which only Christ holds in the New Testament. So with a change of the priesthood, there's a change. There is made of necessity a change also of what? The law. The law changes because there's a different priest. Now, Jesus exemplifies this very well for us. Keep your place here. Let's go to Matthew. Matthew chapter 5. So we talked about it last week. Remember, Moses acted as a mediator for the people of Israel, and he was to hear God's law on their behalf and deliver that law to the people. He was acting as a mediator for them because they could not bear to hear God speaking anymore. And in Deuteronomy, Moses says, the days will come when the Lord is going to raise up a prophet like unto me, him shall ye hear. Okay? Now, I want you to notice the wording here in Matthew chapter 5. Because what's being depicted here is Jesus as the mediator and as a king is coming to give the law of his kingdom. Now watch how this works. Chapter 5, verse 1. And seeing the multitudes, he went up into a what? A mountain. Where did Moses receive the law? In the mountain. He went up into the mountain, received from God, came down, and gave it to the people. This is exactly what's going on here. He went up in the mountain, and when he was set, his disciples came unto him, and he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, okay? So now he begins to give his law to the people. And then he says, coming over here to verse 17, think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law, till all be fulfilled. Now, who is going to fulfill the law? Jesus is. It's about him. He is going to fulfill it. Now, one thing is going to pass from the law. So he is going to fulfill the righteousness of the law. He is going to fulfill the sacrifices of the law. He is also going to fulfill everything the law says about Israel being converted, about Israel being in the land, about him reigning as king. That's what he's talking about. He is going to fulfill that. All of it's going to come to pass. And then he says, whosoever therefore shall break one of these least commandments, and shall teach men so, he shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whosoever shall do and teach them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I say unto you that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, ye shall in no case enter into the kingdom of heaven. Now watch verse 21 here. Ye have heard that it hath been said by them of old time, thou shalt not kill. Where do we hear that? 10 Commandments, right? And that's in the law. And whosoever shall kill shall be in danger of the judgment. So what happens under the old covenant if you kill somebody? You're going to be judged and killed. If it was on purpose. But notice what he says here, verse 22. But I say unto you, that whosoever is what? Angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. And whosoever shall say to his brother, Raka, which means vain fellow, or you worthless, kind of what that's saying, shall be in danger of the council. But whosoever shall say, thou fool, shall be in danger of hellfire. So notice what happens here. There is a change of the law from what it was previous. Now I want you to go to chapter 8 and notice this here. I think it's chapter 8. Maybe it's the last verse 7. I'm sorry. It's the last couple verses of 7. Verse 28 here, chapter 7, verse 28. And it came to pass, when Jesus had ended these sayings, the people were astonished at his doctrine, for he taught them as one having what? Authority, and not as the scribes. Why did he have authority? Because he's the king. Because he's the one better than Moses. Did Moses have authority from God? Absolutely. Did Jesus? Yes. And so, with the change of the priesthood from old to the new, there was a change of the law being made as well. And so, in essence, what is under the old covenant that is applicable to us is brought over to us and restated in the New Testament. That's a summary of where we're going to go. But let me just finish here in chapter number 3 here on your notes, and then we'll dismiss and we'll pick this up next week. So we did back to Hebrews 7, verse 12. We're going to read down here a little bit more. Verse 13, for he of whom these things are spoken pertaineth to another tribe, of which no man gave attendance at the altar. Because the only ones who could be priests were the Levites. There was one king who tried to perform the function, I forget his name. It was Uzziah. It was Uzziah, because that's one of the reasons he became a leper and then eventually died. I think I've got this right. But anyway, one of the kings of Israel, he tried to function as a priest and go in and offer sacrifices at the temple. Well, God struck him with leprosy on account of it, because the kings could not be priests and priests could not be kings. They had to remain entirely separate. And so here he's talking about, for he of whom these things are spoken pertain to another tribe of which no man gave attendance at the altar. For it is evident that our Lord sprang out of Judah, of which tribe Moses spake nothing concerning priesthood. And it is yet far more evident that after the similitude of Melchizedek there ariseth another priest, who is made not after the law of a carnal commandment, but after the power of an endless life. For he testifieth, Thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. For there is verily a disannulling, or more modern, we would say an annulling. There's a disannulling where it's being dissolved of the commandment going before for the weakness and unprofitableness thereof. So he says that old covenant, that law, was not profitable to us. It couldn't save a person. Couldn't keep a person saved, could it? It couldn't make a person any better. A person may act better, but the person themselves was not better. All they were was good acting bad people. It's really all anybody can be, right? It couldn't change the nature of a person. All it could do is command and condemn. That's not very helpful. So he says it was weak and unprofitable. For the law made nothing perfect. Now when Hebrews talks about the word perfect is always a reference to salvation. It's not talking about perfect like we think of perfect in the majority of the New Testament as complete. But it couldn't bring a person to salvation. We'll look at that next week. But the bringing in of a better hope did, by the which we draw nigh unto God. So the priesthood of Melchizedek is an everlasting priesthood. Because what's going to happen to those Levitical priests? 50 years old, the high priest retires and becomes basically a mentor for the next priest that comes in. And then what's going to happen to that priest? He's going to die. And then the new guy's going to have to take over. And then what's going to happen to that guy eventually? He's going to die. And then somebody else is going to have to come in. But Jesus, how many times did he die? Once. And by one sacrifice for all sin forever, he has perfected forever those that come to God by him. He's brought us to eternal salvation. Why? Because his priesthood will never end. He is always there to make intercession for us. Any questions on any of that? We'll work on more of it next week. All right, you're dismissed.